Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers when we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. I am so happy that you've decided to join us again. And I'm also so happy that my guest has decided to join us again. You have met Kathie Giorgio before. Hey, Kathie.
Hi, Karen.
We're so glad that she's here. She is award-winning, critically acclaimed author of 7 novels, with the eighth just about to come out. She writes poetry and essays and short stories. She's also, and I will just, in full disclosure, she's an amazing coach and an amazing developmental editor. I can speak to that from personal experience. She's also a teacher and a workshop leader. She has her own business, which I'm going to ask you about. And, you know, and her company is All's Writer Workshop, Workplace and Workshop,
You got
right?
it.
Did I get that
Yes,
right?
All Nighters
Yes,
Workplace and Workshop.
yes. So this is truly a Renaissance woman. We're going to start though with before we dive into all your projects. I know that your fans out there want to know. So, how are you doing? Now that Michael has passed and your husband Michael has passed, and a little time has gone by, how are you doing?
Grief is such a weird thing. It is truly not even a day by day thing. It is a moment by moment. And I will think that I'm having a really good day. And this just happened the other day. I'm in Oregon right now. I am not at home. I am in a place that I come to every year for my own retreat. And just down the street is a beautiful little coffee shack. So every day I drive down to the coffee shack and I get a French toast latte. And I was driving down there. It had a good writing day. It was sunny. It was beautiful. And a song came on. It was Hello by Evanescence and destroyed me. I couldn't even drive. I had to pull over to the side of the road, sob for about 15 minutes, and then get back on. There's no path, and there's no organization, and I'm an organized person to grief. And so you truly have to learn to be in the moment and just go with it.
Honor
Um,
your feelings.
Right. And in Michael's case, it's funny that you mentioned Renaissance woman because I think the last time we talked, you called me that. And 2 or 3 days later in the mail, I got a t-shirt that said Renaissance woman, and it was Michael. Michael sent it to me after hearing the podcast. So I now have a shirt that says Renaissance woman. But even, just the way he died, being struck by a car, run over by that car, then struggling for 5 months to overcome it, and then dying anyway. The whole thing is trauma. The whole thing is just traumatic. He didn't. I realized again while I was here, I was walking the beach one morning and I suddenly had the thought, my husband did not die. My husband was killed.
He was.
And
Yes,
that's just a whole different mindset.
it's true. That man killed him
Yeah, he did.
and not held responsible. It's just my heart and prayers.
Thank you.
Let us though, first of all, I love that you just said that you've been writing
Hmm.
because I know during this time it's been hard to write. So
Yeah.
that just lifted my heart that you said that you'd been writing. But we'll get to that. But
Okay.
let's talk about your beautiful new book. So first, show us the cover.
Here it is. This is Don't Let Me Keep You.
Isn't
And
that
it
a
will be
gorgeous
released.
cover?
It'll be released on October 3rd.
That is a gorgeous, and we're airing this on October 3rd. So this is
Oh,
Pub
excellent.
Day. Yeah. Ashley, you're my girl. Airing this baby on Pub Day.
Excellent.
And so congratulations
Thank
on your
you.
new book. Tell our audience about the premise of Don't Let. First of all, I love the title, but tell our audience about the premise.
The premise is that parenting is the hardest job in the world. And I wanted to write about a woman who, as a kid, was brilliant in math and in science and was truly pushed toward a STEM lifestyle. And she didn't want it. You know, she all she wanted, really truly, she was enamored of the human body, loved that a child could come from her body, and she wanted to get married and have children. And so that's what she ends up doing. And I wanted to show because she was so pushed to a certain lifestyle, she was very dedicated to trying not to push her children. But as anyone who has been a mother knows, you have influence even when you're not trying to have influence.
Yes.
And so I wanted to show this. And so the book is a very unusual format. It starts with her as a kid and moves into adulthood. And then there's what I call an interlude at the beginning of every chapter, which shows the very first moment that Hildy, her name is Hildy, is alone with that new baby. And she always says to the child, you can be whatever you want to be, but whatever you want to be is going to be great. And then the chapter shows that child much later down the road. Usually as an adult, though there's a couple where they're still young, just to show that they don't necessarily turn out the way she was thinking they would. I also wanted to show that, at least for me, the hardest time of parenting for me is now when my kids are adults because I have to let them go. And you find out at this point that while they are still the center of your existence, you are no longer the center of theirs. They have moved on, they have become their own adults. In my case, I have one child who has his own daughter. For God's sake, he's 40. He's not even a child anymore. I drove him to his first colonoscopy the other day. It's like, how is that even possible? But it's the title, Don't Let Me Keep You. It's a common phrase here in Wisconsin anyway, that when you're talking to someone, you'll say, oh, don't let me keep you. I have to get going now. And I wanted to transform it to motherhood with don't let me keep you. Go out on your life and live what you need to live.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. It doesn't matter how old your kids are. My son is 53 years old. He's still my son. He's still my kid. Our daughter is 52. And my husband and I were just ruminating this morning, like, oh my goodness, what is she doing now? Oh, now our oldest grandson is going off to college.
Mm,
Right? I mean, so there's the second letting go, the second of, I asked, do they have Grandparents' Day at the university? No, Grammy. There was no Grandparents' Day at the
well, they
university.
should.
Don't you think? Prep
Yes.
schools have them. I think colleges should have them. So I totally get, don't let me keep you. That's really, really beautiful. When you speak of Hildy, what is it that you like about her? What really moves you about her? And is there anything that annoys you about her?
Hildy's heart is what pulls me toward her. You know, she is such a loving individual. And I wanted someone who well, let me backtrack a little bit. I have two daughters.
Mhm.
One is now, let me think, 40, 40, 38, 37. She is 37 years old, has been a math geek her entire life. You know, for fun, I used to shop school book sales and buy her math textbooks because that's what she did. And now she teaches math at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette. My other daughter is 23, also very good at math, but loves art and loves to write and plays the violin, and everything about her is art, 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 very artistic, very creative. Having these two at a time when there has been such great change for women in our country has
Mm,
been
mm,
amazing to watch. You know, I have one who is zooming off into, I think if she isn't the only math person in her department, there's only a few in her department. And Livy is just so different even in the art. She does what she wants to do. And I mean, it's incredible to watch the two of them.
yeah.
And I wanted Livy to have the same, what would I call it? Admiration for going into her field as my older daughter has. You know,
Hmm.
she went into a male dominated field. My daughter is going into art therapy, and there's a lot to be said for that too. So I loved Hildy's determination. I
Mm,
loved when she decided that this was going to be what she was going to do. She went out and she did it, and she sticks with it all the way through.
yeah, she does. And
What
so
I found
what does
amazing.
annoys you about her? Or you wish she would work on a little?
Well, and you've read the whole book. So,
Yes.
you know that she ends up towards the end of the book, her final child is a child that she did not plan. And she had trouble with that. She had trouble opening her heart to this child. And that annoyed me. It was like, the only time she really started to relate to this child was when this child came up with a science experiment that she had to do. She wanted to start going out and collecting bugs and pinning them. And then suddenly mom was involved. And I was like, well, wait a minute, aren't you doing what you said you were never going to do? And yes, I talked to my characters as if they
Of
somehow
course.
exist outside of myself. But I just followed along with her. And she does come around, but
Yeah.
that I was like, my gosh, Hildy, you're not sticking with the program here. And she eventually
It's
came back.
amazing, isn't it? That our characters are living, breathing people with minds of their own. And
Definitely.
they take us places we like don't intend. There we
Yes.
are. Yeah. You write in so many. One of the things I so admire about you is that you, and one of the reasons, like I said, you were a Renaissance woman, is you write so well in so many different genres, not
Thank
just
you.
novels, but poetry and essays, haiku poetry. I mean, just a whole book. You're so you are so creative, and just on. So, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite? Like I do love, even your novels are all different genres. What do you have a favorite?
Fiction, without a doubt, fiction. And I mean, if some ruling came down from up above that said I could only write in one genre, it would be the short story. I love the
Mhm.
short story, and the majority of my novels, including Don't Let Me Keep You, incorporates the short story into its structure because I love it so much. It's such a little blast of adrenaline, and it's such a challenge to write. You have to transform a character in only so many pages. You don't have a whole novel to do it in. And so I love the short story. And I think that shows, my essays usually tell a story, not fiction, but
Mhm.
they tell a story. My poetry, while I do a lot of haiku, I also do a lot of prose poetry, which is a little story. So it shows up a lot in my work.
So I think you have to explain to our audience. I understand, but you will need to explain to our audience when you say your short stories are incorporated into your novels. Could you just give us a sentence or two about that? Explain that.
Sure.
What does
Well,
that mean?
this book is a great example.
Mhm.
The overall story arc is Hildy. How does Hildy handle this desire to do something that is so different from what her parents want for her? And then how does she incorporate that desire into her life? But within the book, there are the chapters that are from the points of view of her children. And those chapters are complete short stories. They have a beginning, a middle, an end. Each one has its own conflict. Each one has its own resolution. And it is also outside of Hildy's point of view. It is in those kids' point of view. So a lot of times the reader can even feel a bit like a voyeur. We get to know things that Hildy does not, but they are encapsulated. They are total stories. They aren't
That is
open-ended.
just so clever and fresh. So I love that. And so are you working on something? You're in Oregon and you're trying to get back to writing. I know that, grief can get in the way of our creativity or can spur it. Are you working on anything in particular now?
I am now. I wasn't when
Yeah.
I got here, but I am now. I was, I'm well known for saying that I have never had writer's block, and I haven't. There is always something to write about if you have your eyes open to the world. But the whole situation with my husband was all encompassing. When he was dealing with the injuries and with trying to recover, I was his advocate and I was his power of attorney, and I was having to do things I had never done before in my life. And if I sat down to write, there was just nothing. There was no energy. I knew what I wanted to write, but I couldn't put a sentence together to save my soul. After he died, then, I mean, I think I was on such automatic pilot for those 5 months that the full force of the trauma hit me, and I was depleted. I was completely depleted. I got here, and this place, I have been coming to Oregon since 2006, to the same house, to the same town. The women who own this little house won't even buy a painting anymore without talking to me first to see if I would like it in the house. And this place is magic. There's just the sound of the ocean is right outside my window, and it's all mine. I leave everything behind when I come here. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a wife. I'm not a mother. I am just me. And who I am is a writer. So I got here on a Saturday. I spent Sunday sitting on the deck just staring at the ocean. Monday, I stepped onto this place. This is a little writing nook. There's a special table here. My books, they put my books on display off to the side. And I stepped up and I was like, I have no idea what's going to happen here. And the next time I looked up, I had 20 pages of a new novel down. And I just passed page 60 yesterday. So it is, well, I could show you this too, because it's a sequel. This was a book of mine that came out a few years ago called If You Tame Me. And I am writing the sequel to the iguana book, as it's known. So, and Newt is still around. The iguana is coming. But I wanted, If You Tame Me is all about a woman who finds herself at 53, unmarried, feels very much that she is a feminist, but wonders if she can be a feminist if she doesn't feel like her life is complete without a mate. And at the beginning of the book, she so doesn't want to adopt a cat. She feels like she needs to adopt a cat and be a cat woman, which is wonderful with some of the comments that have been in the news lately. But she goes to a pet store and she adopts a year-old iguana, Newt. And so he becomes a major part of the book. In this book, she does get married in the course of If You Tame Me. In this book, I wanted to tackle the topic of Roe versus Wade and it being repealed. And in the book, one of her friends, she works in a department store, one of her friends at work turns up pregnant the day that Roe versus Wade is repealed. However, I'm also writing about grief. The book starts with Audrey coming home with the urn holding her husband. So I'm probably working through my own grief through Audrey, who I very much feel for and connect with. But it's coming and it feels great. So yeah. And I
Sounds
started a
good.
book of poetry.
And a book of poetry.
And a book of
Just on
poetry.
the side. Just on the
Just on
side.
the side. Yeah, that I burst. I don't plan ever to write poetry. I just sit down and it happens. And since coming here, I think I've written 6 or 7 poems. So,
Wonderful. Yeah, I have a dear friend. I have two friends that are poets, and they both say the same thing. They say it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and then poems just start
yep.
start to flow, start to flow. So I know that we have a lot of writers who watch. What are you reading? What are you writing? And maybe you could just tell them, remind them, because some of them know you and heard before, but just tell our audience about your business, about all writers.
All Writers, full name is All Writers Workplace and Workshop, is an international creative writing studio. It's been around, it'll be 20 years in January that I have been in business, which to me is absolutely amazing.
Hmm?
We offer online and on-site courses and workshops in all genres and abilities of creative writing. So whether you are someone who is literally putting that first word on the page, or you're someone like Karen who has several books under her belt, you have a place in All Writers. It's very much a community. I wanted to make it a safe place for writers to come, no matter where they were in their career, that they could come in and they could talk with people who are at their level, and also people who are maybe a little bit ahead of them to give good advice and good encouragement to keep them going. So it's located in Waukesha, Wisconsin for the live classes, but thank God for Zoom. I am everywhere in the world. I do have a full faculty too that teaches with me. Uh, One of the things that is very important to me is that when you work with somebody, you're working with someone who is doing what you want to do. So if you want to write a novel, you will not be working with a memoirist. If you want to write poetry, you won't be working with a novelist. You will be working with someone who has done what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I can say, this is the second time I've worked with you, my second novel that I worked with you on, and it's every interaction. There's always an aha for me. It's
Good.
like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I got it. No, and the developmental part of your work, the developmental writing, as you are looking at something from that aspect of, is this all true to the character? Did, as you call it, are all of the knots of all the threads knotted? And
Yep.
it's just been a wonderful experience. True Grace, you were just an amazing coach for True Grace. And now with Justice for Emerson, which comes out in March, just been amazing. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful help. So I highly recommend this woman. Uh,
Thank you.
so this is what are you reading? What are you writing? She didn't pay me for that commercial either.
No, I didn't.
What are you reading? What are you writing? So tell us a little bit about, have you been able to squeeze in any reading over this time of reading all of your students' work and then grieving and then got any reading in?
Sure. And when I was at home and when I go home, I don't read for fun as much as I do when I'm out here. I tend to read at lunch. I insist that I sit at the table and eat and read a book just to get me out of that mindset for a while. And I also read in bed right before I go to sleep.
Mm.
Here, it's an orgy. I have books everywhere throughout the house. There's a book next to the bed. There's a book next to here. There's a book by the couch. And there's a book in the bathroom. Wherever I am reading a book. And so I just finished, and you'll have to find the name of the author for me because I can't think of it, but Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which was the Goodreads Book of the Year in 2022. And it was amazing. It was just
Mm.
phenomenal. And when I first saw it, I was like, it's about two people that work on video games. And I was like, so what? But when you get into it, there was so much about it, first off, that is like writing. And it is writing, it's creating a story for video games, but a lot of interactions and relationships. And I mean, it has everything you could possibly want in a book.
That sounds wonderful. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. And is there a book um, that maybe you've not told us about in the past, but who remembers? But right? But that had like a really big impact on your writing, something that, from your earlier life that
Mhm.
just really talked to who you are as a writer or as a person.
John Irving's Hotel New Hampshire. Out
Mm,
it out. It is my, if you go to it, get stuck on a desert island and can only have one book with you, what would that book be? Book. I love that book. It really opened up the world of the quirky character to me. And Irving is a genius at writing characters that you've never seen before, but you've passed them on the street. He has one character he calls Susie the Bear, which is a grown woman who goes around wearing a bear costume all the time. And you don't question it while you're reading it. You don't stop and say, who the hell would walk around in a bear costume all the time? You just accept it.
yeah.
So that book just changed my life, and changed my idea of eh, making your characters believable doesn't necessarily mean make them John Smith.
Right.
You have to make them believable. You have to create a world around them that makes them believable. I have a fidget ring that I twirl when I get nervous, and it is engraved with the words, keep walking past the open windows, which is a phrase from Hotel New Hampshire.
Nice. Very nice. So now that we've totally gotten everybody, because lots of maybe people who've met you before, but there's also lots of new people. How can people find you? Where can they find you?
Well, you can find me pretty much everywhere. My website is kathiegiorgio.org. That's where you can find me, the writer. Where you can find me, the teacher, is at allwritersworkshop.com. That is the studio's website. Then you can also find me on Facebook, you can find me on X, and you can find me on Instagram.
Well, I'm so happy to see you, and thank you so much for joining me today. I hope all of you are already following me on all of those platforms and at KarenEOsborne.com. And I hope you will follow Kathie and let her know that you met her right here. And what are you reading? What are you writing? See you next week, everybody. Thanks for joining us.